Okay, so we're going to be moving on to section 3.5, which is talking about proving lines are parallel. Now, previously, we talked about that if you have two parallel lines, right? Angles, there are two angles that correspond with each other. Because we have parallel lines, these angles cut by a transversal are going to be corresponding. What we also can prove now is that if we have those corresponding angles and we know that they're congruent, it proves that the two lines that they're connected to through the transversal are going to be parallel. Now, let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, so here it is. It says that if you have two lines cut by some transversal, and then you know that the corresponding angle, like 1 and 3, are congruent, then we know that A and B have to be parallel, right? All right, we can say, well, okay, so we know 1 and 3 are corresponding. We know that 7 and 5 are corresponding. Okay, if they told us that 4 and 2 were corresponding angles, they were congruent, we would know that A and B are parallel. Or if they told us that 8 and 6 were corresponding, then we would know that they're parallel lines as well. Okay? Now, there's also another important postulate that has to do with parallel lines. It says if you have some line, okay, and a point not on that line, there is exactly one and only one line that I can draw through that point that is parallel to the other, okay? And that actually helps us with what we just talked about, prove that we can actually use other special angles to prove that they are going to be other congruent angles to prove that they are going to be parallel lines, okay, cut by the same transversal. So what are some of those angle relationships that help us? Okay, well, let's look at those. Okay, well, the first one we have are alternating exterior angles. So basically, if we know that we have two alternating exterior angles that are congruent, okay, along the same transversal, we know that our lines P and Q here would be considered parallel. Okay, they're going to be parallel if those alternating exterior angles are congruent. All right, let's look at the next one, consecutive interior. So if we have two angles, in this case 4 and 5, and they tell us that those two add up to 180, okay, because remember, interior angles add up to 180. So if we know that 4 and 5 add up to 180, it proves that P and Q are also going to be parallel, right? Let's look at the next one. 3-7 says that if we have alternating interior angles, 8 and 6 right there, are congruent. Since we know they're congruent, it means that our lines have to be parallel. It's basically like we're working backwards every single time. So previously it used to say, okay, well, if we knew that P and Q were parallel, 6 and 8 would be congruent. Now they're saying if we know 6 and 8 are congruent, P and Q are going to be parallel. We're going backwards, right? And finally, the last one, remember we said that if we had two parallel lines, their transversal would be perpendicular and it would form 90-degree angles. Now it's basically saying that if we know that those lines are perpendicular, if R is perpendicular to both of them, then we know that they're parallel, right? Again, working backwards. All right, so let's put all of this together into some equation, right? All right. All right, so here we go. It says, from this image, okay, we know, or from this image right here, our job is to determine if the lines are parallel, and if they are, which postulate or theorem would make it true. Okay, so if we look at this one, they tell us that 1 and, I guess you can't see 6 right there. 1 and 6 are congruent. So what type of lines, or excuse me, what type of angles are those? And then which lines are going to be parallel? Well, since 1 and 6 are on the outside and they're alternating, these are alternating exterior angles, okay? Alternating exterior angles. And they're alternating exterior along which two lines? So it proves that line L is parallel to line N, okay? And how do I know that? Because angle 1 is on line L and angle 6 is on line N. So I know that those two are going to be parallel. All right, cool. Let's look at the next one. Okay, next one says this. Angle 2 and angle 3 are congruent. So angle 2 and angle 3. So if I look, those are on alternating sides of our transversal, and they're inside L and M. So those are alternating interior angles. And that would prove that L is parallel to M, okay? Very good. Now, if we just have 2 and 3 are congruent, it doesn't necessarily mean that L is congruent to N still. It's only talking about lines L and M, okay? All right, very good.